Welcome to the Audible, where we check out DraftKings quarterbacks and see who the best values are, who the top plays are. And our buddy Jason is reviewing that for us this week. So I'm excited to get into these. It's week one. We're all excited for everything. But I think you nailed down some of the main guys I'm on in both cash and tournaments. So going to be fun.
Yeah, it was definitely tough to kind of, narrow it down to five. I mean, there's guys like Derek Carr that is in a great spot as well. Kirk Cousins, interesting GPP guy. So, I mean, there was a lot of different quarterbacks. But, yeah, I feel like these five are kind of the ones that I'll be focused on.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Drew Brees, Andrew Luck, those guys are all awesome as well. But you can't just roster all the top guys at the top prices. So let's take a look at some cash game arms. I guess we can say it's not the pitcher pod, but they're still throwing more often than they're running. But so who are you looking at here?
Russell Wilson, I mean, 7,900. Really hard to argue against him in cash games. I mean, look, he's coming off a terrific year, threw for over 4,000 yards, 34 passing touchdowns. Obviously gives you a couple extra points running the ball as well. I mean, you look last year, he threw 483 times, which was the highest in his 4 years in the NFL, and then came with a career high in completion percentage. So just one of those efficient guys. Obviously, the matchup sets really well with the Dolphins. I mean, coming on the road there, their secondary is very bad, ranked 29th per Football Outsiders. And then kind of an odd stat here. I mean, obviously, 16 games against AFC opponents. Wilson has a 110.6% quarterback rating. He just kind of dominates guys that he doesn't see too often.
Yeah, and I think the writing was on the wall a few years ago when the Seahawks drafted Paul Richardson in the second round. It sort of seemed like, okay, we're starting to look post Marshawn Lynch era here. We're going to try to open up this offense. And a lot of people were like, no, they're just going to stay run heavy. At the end of last year, we saw the potential of Russell Wilson in a pass heavy offense. I mean, basically a lot like this next guy we're going to talk about here in terms of efficiency. They have Tyler Lockett they got him last year, which was pretty lucky. I mean, they have a plethora of weapons that they're going to use. Obviously, Doug Baldwin and Jermaine Kearse there as well. So it's going to be amazing. Jimmy Graham might play. He might not. Either way, that might not factor into the passing game a whole lot early on in the year. Moral of the story, RIP Dolphins, team total of 27. Russell Wilson, cash game play for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, hard to really get away from him. And as you kind of were transitioning towards Mr. Aaron Rodgers, I mean, Mr. Efficient here, 8,500. Obviously you're paying up. It's not a bad idea to pay up even with Dak Prescott on the slate. I mean, you got a lot of value running backs, a lot of value wide receivers to go with. Packers on the road against the Jags defense that, yes, they're going to be improved soon. Probably not going to be happening to show it in week one. Obviously, a Jordy Nelson that may or not play 100% of the snaps or kind of the game in general, but still plenty of weapons there for Rodgers, and I expect him to kind of bounce back. And it's odd when you look at last year, he threw 31 touchdowns, 3,800 yards. That's a bad year for Aaron Rodgers, and that's kind of like It's crazy to think about. So I'm looking for him to reproduce here what he did in 2012 and 2014 and kind of really shred this Jacksonville secondary.
And what's even more crazy is in the 3 previous years, he averaged about 40 touchdowns a season. So, I mean, I think that's what we get back to in 2016. We're looking at Jordy Nelson back from the ACL. Obviously, might not be his former self anymore, even getting up there in age 30, 31. But overall, he's the straw that stirs the Randall Cobb drink. When Nelson's there taking the top off the secondary, Randall Cobb opens up in the middle, and it's just a traumatic experience for most secondaries to go through. So, yeah, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to get back to that, 2 to 3 touchdowns a game. I think 3 is very likely here against this Jaguars defense, as does Vegas. Projected them for 25.5, 26, depending on where you're looking. I think I like the price. I don't think many people are going to be paying up for quarterback, at least not Aaron Rodgers, because of, Dak Prescott and all the values down there, Carson Wentz and whoever else you want to get goofy with, Robert Griffin. So I think there's going to be relatively low ownership on Rodgers, might be the lowest ownership you're going to get on him, and might be the cheapest you're going to get him all year. So this is certainly a time to strike with him and stacking. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, as you pointed out, Jordan Nelson may not be completely healthy, is completely healthy, but may not be the same exact guy we've seen all the time. But his presence out there is going to help out so many people. And even if they get the running game going to where it was, 2 years ago, that's going to open things up because sure. Rodgers isn't going to throw a ton, but he's going to be so efficient to where he gets that 250, 2 to 3 touchdowns a game. That's just kind of what he does.
And yes, the Jaguars have a ton of young talent. They drafted Jalen Ramsey, who's potentially, based on scouting reports and what he looked like at Florida State, a generational type prospect. They got Dante Fowler coming back, and the really athletic guy out of UCLA that I forget his name right now. But yeah, they got three very young, promising players. But again, year 1 and 2 for all those guys, it might be a little too early to project the Jags to be a good defense.
Yeah, Miles Jack is who you're thinking
Miles
of.
Jack, yes, yeah. Monster. I like him at running back more so, but whatever.
Looking at GPP guys, though, this one isn't going to come as a shock to people. You're not going to shock anyone with ownership with Matthew Stafford. But I like the upside that he brings, and especially the stacking opportunity that he brings for the price, because 7,200, obviously not a bad price for a quarterback, but Marvin Jones is going to be a popular play. I like the upside that he brings. Golden Tate on a site like DraftKings with full point PPR. And then you look at this Colts defense. Vontae Davis is out. He's going to be out for about the first few weeks of the season, possibly longer. They already allowed the 8th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks last year, and now you're going to be taking away their best corner. This one just seems like a no-brainer. Even on the road in this kind of situation, it's going to be one of those back-and-forth affairs where I'm expecting really on both sides, because you can make the case for Andrew Luck as well. I think Stafford's going to have actually probably a higher ownership than Luck just because of the price.
And yeah, no Vontae Davis is bad news for the Colts. So you just look at this offense, Marvin Jones, Golden Tate, fairly similar players. Marvin Jones kind of used down the field a little bit more, but overall they kind of take up the middle. Anquan Bolden, obviously that 5 yards and turn around and make the catch with 3 guys on him type of guy at this point in his career. But he's still probably going to be able to get it done. And then Eric Ebron, when healthy, we'll see how many snaps he gets, but I just think Stafford's going to be able to, pick them apart piece by piece, 10 yards by 10 yards. And I think that's going to equal a lot of volume at the end of the day. And underrated in matchups like this, the pass catching backs like Amir Abdul and Theo Riddick, they're much more effective in matchups like this. And for Stafford as well, you're going to get a lot more yak opportunities with missed tackles and stuff like that. So, those dump offs that go for 20 yards instead of 5 is a big difference at the end of the day. So yeah, love Stafford and this offense in general against the Colts.
Yeah, and it's not like that front seven's going to be scaring you off of anyone either. Their front seven's even worse than the secondary is at this point.
Certainly. So one more GPP guy here. Sort of looking at this Ravens defense, Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah, I like him a lot, and I like him especially paired up with Sammy Watkins. It's 6,900. Sammy Watkins isn't even priced that badly on DraftKings either. Baltimore, middle of the league in points allowed to opposing quarterbacks last year, 5th most to opposing wideouts. Taylor obviously wasn't the most consistent guy, but we saw the upside. 4 weeks last year, he went over 25 DK points, and it was against Washington, Houston, Kansas City, and New England. Those are above average, defenses. This is a Baltimore defense that, sure, there might be some name power there, but this is not one I'm really shying away from. And I think really looking at the total for the Buffalo, I could actually see them kind of hitting it over at a pretty decent rate.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of CJ Mosley. I'm a big fan of Ozzie Newsome. I'm a relatively solid fan of Timmy Jernigan up front there, but overall, I don't know how good this Ravens defense is, they just weren't good last year. And obviously their whole team was injured, so you can't really knock them too bad. But, the post-Ray Lewis era hasn't been as kind to them in terms of defense and dominance. So, yeah, I like Tyrod here. I think that's an interesting matchup, especially like you mentioned with Sammy Watkins. I also think an interesting guy to keep an eye on is Robert Woods in this matchup. I'm not sure how they're going to play Watkins, so if they double him, Robert Woods might be the interesting move with Tyrod. So that's something I'm looking at. I might not, actually throw that in there, but it's something I at least take a look at, you know.
Yeah, it certainly is something to consider. I mean, we've kind of always talked about there is no real secondary option with the Bills outside of
No.
Watkins. You got Charles Clay. You do have a Robert Woods there. McCoy once was a pass catching back who you could rely on, not so much anymore. But there are certainly options, and it is at a cheap price. And I do think they're going to go really under the radar because we've already touched on, obviously the Raiders game. You have the Lions game. I mean, Packers. So they're going to get kind of really overlooked.
Definitely.
In terms of value, this one, not a shocker to anyone. I mean, Dak Prescott at 5K. Must play in tournaments? No. I do think you can really swerve off them in cash games. It's going to be hard to kind of avoid still. In terms of getting a read on where things go, if you can make a really solid lineup without him, I'm all for kind of avoiding. But if you can really stack a lineup that you like, and when he's going up against a defense that was terrible last year, obviously they made some adjustments in the offseason, but I don't expect them to really be anything outside of the top half of the league. And you look at the Giants, I mean, they allowed the seventh most rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks last year. So Prescott certainly has that edge. I mean, he can run the ball. He is versatile in that department.
I do think we're looking at a semi-limited floor here, but he's literally the minimum. And I've seen a lot of late sort of saying fade him, because he is the chalk. And I get that in tournaments. That's certainly viable. But I mean, if you can make those lineups with, I mean, even if we're talking about the Thursday 16 game slate, if you can make, that Odell Beckham, Julio, and a Hopkins or something like that, and you can get those three premium receivers in there. I mean, I'm not going to tell you not to play him if that can work, So, yeah, I get it. He's not. It's certainly starting a rookie is a little nerve wracking, especially against the Giants defense that might have improved a little bit, but overall, they're still the Giants. This is still Cowboys Giants. Projected team total of 26. And he's got the rushing potential. That's the other thing. If he runs for 40 yards, what does he have to do in the passing game to hit value at 5K? So I don't know. I think he's certainly viable. I'm not going all in. And I mean, in cash, it's kind of tough to avoid it as well. So I don't know. I'm in. I don't have anything bad to say about this play. I'm not fade him.
No, I'm definitely in agreement. I mean, he's been obviously the talk of the town for the last few days here. And you just look, I mean, yes, I do think the ceiling is a bit capped. Obviously, if he gets that rushing touchdown and grabs another one somewhere else, I mean, that's going to be tough to pass up at the price with what your other guys are going to do around him. But, if he does have an average game, the pricing in week one, there are a lot of other values you can work around and still get guys like Julio Jones and pay up for Russell Wilson or Rodgers.
Yep, certainly. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. It looks like those are the five we're kind of I'm in pretty much agreement with all this. I mean, I like Luck too as a high-priced guy, but these are pretty much the guys I'm looking at, especially in terms of cash games. So I think that's a pretty good review, and we will catch you guys in week 2. Thanks for tuning in.